On today's episode, we talk about how someone with a welcoming atmosphere could never be a groomer, why capitalism is apparently anti-family, how some people really want the FBI to search their home, and two opposite and terrible takes on student loan debt forgiveness. This is Cringe Posts. Hello friends, welcome to this episode of the Cringe Posts podcast. This is the show where we gather the cringiest political and cultural takes that we find in our feeds, and we talk about them, dissect them, show where they went wrong, and of course, laugh along the way. My name is Donald, and I'm here with my co-host Britt, and we are going to make fun of ourselves first, as we always do. We find our own bad, cringy posts because we don't want to throw stones from glass houses. Before we get into that, just a reminder to like and comment and subscribe. All that good stuff really helps us out. We love to see it. And if you want to follow the visual companion to this, we have that at cringeposts.com. That includes all of the posts that we are critiquing today, if you want to see them and you are listening to this through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or other. We also have our YouTube channel where you can view this and the recordings of us speaking if you want to see our beautiful faces. Without further ado, we will go ahead and look back to March 1 of 2014, when Britt writes, "If you do what you love, lack of sleep never matters. If you do what you hate, no amount will ever be enough. So thankful I've been blessed to never have any sleep." Smiley face. And I've got to be honest. I think there's hidden wisdom here, man.
There's a bit.
I don't know.
There's a bit.
There's wisdom here.
There's a bit. But it's the reason I cringed when I saw it is because I wrote this when I was in college, and I definitely got enough sleep. You know, like I for legitimate amount. Like when I did the startup, 3 years ago, there was a period of time where there were a couple, days in a month where I would not go for sleep for about 48 hours. I think my record was 56 hours of no sleep, just working, doing stuff. That's not sleeping. Yeah. In college, getting 6 to 7 hours of sleep, even though that might be not that much or whatever, like that's still sleeping. And so I was just trying to prove I'm such a hard worker or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's it's also someone I was looking through it. Someone commented on I call BS. I think you do sleep. They were right. And then two, someone else says hey, this is pretty good, but you also need to if you want to keep doing what you love, you need to have a little bit of self-care,
yeah.
There is, I think there is wisdom in being disciplined enough to be hey, I'm not going to stay up playing video games or doing something stupid because I need to sleep so I can continue to do what I love at a sustainable pace in a way that is done at a quality level that's high enough. Right. So the spirit of this, I would say, is correct. And that hey, you should do what you love because then it makes it easy to get up in the morning. That's definitely true. What I didn't like about it, I thought was cringe, was just it's me trying to kind of almost humble brag or something. I don't know. That's
yeah,
and that's how a lot. I feel bad because you have all these cool political takes where you are actually thinking about important stuff, and then my takes are I'm humble bragging, or I'm talking about I went to eat Denny's and I paid the price. How embarrassing.
Well, that's that's just because I was doing both, so I was humble bragging and cringing, and then I was also speaking to things I didn't know. So
at least, Anyways, for all you people listening and watching, I was humble bragging here, and I was also kind of not telling the truth. I mean, from a certain perspective, maybe I was telling the truth, but I think when you kind of zoom out and look at people that actually don't sleep, I was definitely sleeping quite a bit. And I was staying up till, you and I played Smash Bros all the time late at night, and I was playing League of Legends late at night and all sorts of stuff. So,
well, and it's funny because I think that this is the kind of post where older generations look down and to their credit, rightly so, almost like you did right now, where you reflect and you say, you're not actually having a lack of sleep. You don't even know what a lack of sleep is, kind of a thing. But it makes me think of when college students do the same thing with money, where they're like, oh my gosh, I'm broke, college student, I can't afford this thing. And then they go out to eat and you're like, well, you paid for your college cafeteria already. Why are you going out to eat and spending $20 on a lunch when you have a free meal that you could be taking advantage of, and then later turning around and complaining? And so it's kind of the same thing where it feels like a lot of the times people complain, oh my gosh, I had to pull an all-nighter to study. And it's what are you talking about? Like 2 nights ago, you drove all the way to the beach to be there at 2 a.m. and drove all the way back.
Yeah.
And like, sure, that's fun. That's a great college experience. But you don't get to then complain, oh my gosh, I pulled an all-nighter last night to study for this test. It's like, well, you put yourself in that situation.
Yeah, no one cares about what happened. Like, it's you did something and you reaped a consequence because of it. Yeah. I was telling one of my buddies, this kid I used to kind of mentor and stuff, it's like, college is one thing, and then the real world, and I've talked about it on the show, but the real world is like finals week every week, but if you fail the final, you don't eat. Like, that's just, that's how the real world is, and college is just, it's like the tutorial, and you get unlimited respawns until you get it right in a lot of ways.
Well,
I will say the Denny's 246 menu, though, that was tempting over the calf at NU, because the calf sometimes is not so good. And if I could spend $2 and I could catch a ride with someone there, $2 was enough. I think their quesadilla was $2. That's a good deal. Not that anymore, for sure. But
I have to admit, I was the guy who went along to hang out with friends, and then if someone had like the unlimited pancakes order, I'd steal their food and they just keep getting more. But I was the guy who didn't order. Yeah, I was the free rider. But I mean, I was that way to a fault. So
so much foreshadowing. College students and free rider problems and all sorts of things.
I know. Kind of almost like that's going to be a subject we're hitting. I don't know. Weird. Okay, but we'll move on to our first cringe post here, and this one it doesn't specifically reference this if you're not, but the common refrain about a lot of these teachers and people who are promoting the sort of sexual education curriculums in schools, or the pro sexual minority training that's often encouraging kids in these ways, or even the drag show stuff. We featured some posts talking about like making that part of sex ed and stuff like that, and the response of course to that has been calling them groomers. Of course, referring to people who groom people for sexual assault. And this term has actually even been banned in a sense by Twitter, where it will subdue any posts with that word in them, and it will artificially lower them in the algorithm. Anyway, so that's the context for here if you're not currently aware what this person's talking about. But they tweet, I trained as a gymnast under Larry Nassar. I know what a pedophile and a groomer are. It's not a teacher with an all are welcome sign. It's not a librarian who has award-winning books on their shelves. Love your kids. Thank a teacher. Donate to a library. Cut the S. And the thing that's so cringy about this to me is, and let me first off and be clear, like, this person obviously suffered in a sense to be under Larry Nassar. That's a horrible thing. What he did was wrong and horrible, and if this person experienced any of that actual grooming, that is horrible, and they don't deserve that and shouldn't have been put through that. The other thing about this, though, is grooming can also take the form of more than one form. To say, I interacted with a serial killer, and so the guy who is trapping people in their homes and burning their houses, that's not a serial killer, because he's not coming up behind you with chloroform and slitting your throat. It's like, what are you talking about? There's different ways that people manipulate. There's different ways that people coax others into patterns of being manipulated. So this person that's trying to claim, oh, well, when you're calling them groomers, you don't even know what a real groomer is. The other aspect of it to me is it's like, yeah, but when you are sort of blanket addressing all of these kids and you're encouraging sexual thoughts and relations with kids, that is a categorical step of groomer behavior and pedophilia. And so while you're saying, okay, groomer, you're not necessarily accusing every single literal person who's a proponent of that of individually seeking to groom a child and prey on them. The idea of that is that you are categorically calling them out for promoting a culture and promoting an atmosphere where that happens. And so in the same way that maybe you're not, saying like, I'm encouraging people to go out and harbor, to mark their territory and antagonize gangs. It's like, well, you're not technically part of the gang war, but you're contributing to that atmosphere. Kind of, you're stoking the flames. And so this, I don't know, this take here seems to me like you're just trying to narrowly define since I have a level of authority and experience on this, everyone else's experience and this is wrong, and I'm not gonna allow that for whatever reason.
Yeah, the other aspect of it, and I'm not victim blaming or anything like that. Obviously, what this lady went through is awful, but it's like, yeah, you know what a pedophile and a groomer was, and obviously, with Larry Nassar's stuff, it's like he hid it well enough for you to get in the room with him, right? And you didn't know until he started doing things to you, right? So there's an aspect of like, it's like, yeah, it's not going to be obvious. A pedophile or a groomer is not walk around with pedophile on their shirt or whatever. And so that's what drives me crazy about her last, her second half of this post. It's like, it's not a teacher with all her welcome sign. It's not a librarian who has an award-winning books. It's like that's one. The stuff that people are calling groomer stuff is way more obvious than that. But then two, it's like groomers and pedophiles use these simple, small little things, right? They're trying to be a little bit deceptive, and they try and hide it behind like, oh no, like this is perfectly normal and innocent. Larry Nassar said, oh no, I'm just doing like a specific type of procedure to help you become a better gymnast, right? It's always like, it's cloaked in like good intentions and like, oh, this is a trustworthy person. And it's like, who is more trustworthy to a child than a teacher, a person in authority that they're forced to spend 8 hours a day with and are told by their parents to listen to, and no one has any visibility on? Like, even if the teacher is totally good and totally like pure intentions and all these things, you should at least be skeptical, right? Or have a healthy skepticism of the person that spends 8 hours a day with your child and that you don't get to see anything about. And a lot of the public schools are trying to pass, legislation through where you don't actually have to go tell, your child doesn't have to tell you about, what they're talking about in the classroom, all these different things. And so it seems disingenuous because, obviously this person does know what a pedophile and a groomer are, but I don't know if they've taken the lesson that they've learned from that. Like, it might not be apparent to them. It's like, no, the reason Larry Nassar was able to violate you is because he deceived you, right? Deceived you with good intentions and nice things and like all the right words and all these different things. And it's like, and then she proceeds to lay out like, oh, all these nice things these teachers do. One, that's a straw man, because that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about, oh, there's like a transgender man on a stripper pole in this middle of the street with a kid on his lap. Like, okay, I don't know what else you need to see to call that what it is.
Right.
But even if you disregard that side of it, it's like, well, just because they have the all are welcome sign and just because, the person dresses up in the nice suit does not mean that they're a good person. And this person of all people should know that, right?
Yeah, well, and to think about the fact that you could list Larry Nassar in this sort of list of qualifications of who doesn't count as a groomer so easily if you didn't know Larry Nassar was a groomer. So it's not a librarian who has award-winning books on their shelves. It's not a teacher with an all are welcome sign. It's not a professional medical, therapist who's won many awards from prestigious universities and who sits on the boards of all kinds of organizations that are. It's like he fit all of the qualifications for person who was well respected in the community, person who had all of the proper credentials that you would want to be trusted. I mean, and here's the reality of it, right? I'm not trying like we make fun of ourselves and we try not to throw stones from glass houses. We also have to call out people in circles that we are fond of or a part of that have violated this. Like, I think of the most heartbreaking thing in recent history for me is like Ravi Zacharias, who's a great Christian apologist who set up an incredible apologist network, and he was sexually abusing people for years and got away with it because of his place of authority and because he, for quote unquote security reasons, wouldn't go on their Wi-Fi, and because of medical reasons had to have certain massage techniques, and that's where he would do his abuse and stuff. And so it's like, I'm not trying to say that it's only the people who are ideologically different than me who can be deceptive in these ways, and you're such a fool for not seeing it. But yeah, to your point, like, the entire deceptive act is having these things of it could never be this person. Yes. And the horrible reminder is that it can be anyone. And so, yeah, so like you said, this is so much more blatant and so much more obvious. And goodness, if we haven't had story after story of horrible teacher behaviors with sexual acts, sexual relations, even just like watching pornography in the classroom. Like all these horrible examples in public schools of people doing these outright disgusting acts. And you can't call that out as a groomer. And you're just going to sort of say, no. It's never going to be them. They have all these nice things, which are the exact sorts of cover that these people use when they are a groomer or a pedophile. Okay, we'll move on to the next post here. This one reads, "Capitalism is anti-family. Any economic system that requires both parents to work and work more hours so that the owner class can increase profits, forcing them to spend less time with their children, cannot be pro-family." And so let's instead go to the system that would want their children to be sent off to indoctrination camps 10 hours a day and force the parents to be in an involuntary job field for 10 hours a day, separating them all day. Like, even if you bought this really bad straw man of what capitalism is, it's also like your proposed utopia is either the government pays everyone to stay home and raise this wonderful family and somehow things magically appear, which I don't think even the most ideologically won over socialist or communist really thinks. I think there's an innate connection with reality that you have to at least understand that things come from things and things come from effort. But the realistic historic alternative is that either you have a population that is able to spend more time with their family and lives in greater poverty, and the children don't get to survive as often, or the parents have a much lower standard of ability and things they can provide with their kids, or in worst case scenarios, parents and kids are literally separated. The kids are told to inform on their parents, and they're sent to these indoctrination camps. Parents are forced to work in involuntary ways. It's so funny to me that this person views capitalism as this anti-family mechanism when basically every other system has had either more oppression to families or the inability for families to grow and provide for themselves and be self-sustaining and well off.
This kind of screams to me as someone like kind of when we have biblical takes from like a leftist saying that, I think it was last week where they're like, Jesus would vote for Biden. It's like, well, what business do you have saying any of that, especially if you don't believe in Jesus or any of the values that he espouses? This person clearly doesn't believe in capitalism, probably doesn't believe in family, in general. And so it's like, okay, if this is capitalism, right, where you are, require both parents to work and you have to send them off to wherever school to go do stuff, it's like, let's start by making it so that people have to stay home with one parent has to stay home. So that means abolishing the public school. And it's like, oh no, we can't do that. Like that's some trust. How are these kids going to get educated? It's like, all you have to do is say that and you realize that this is a disingenuous take. The other side of it too is like, these people tend to be very, very egalitarian in how they view gender roles. And very much like will look down upon like a traditional conservative family that's like, no, like women are mostly designed and made for like taking care of the home, raising children, and keeping a house and all those things. And they're kind of sexist too, because they view that as like less work. You and I don't view that as less work. We view that as like, wow, that's like equal and as important, and more important in some ways than the work that someone who is like working to provide food for the table and stuff does. But these people are very anti that. And it's like, well, okay, if that means that, the reason we have an economy in a lot of ways that where two people have to work is because it's the two-parent trap, right? Suddenly you have double the amount of workforce that has come into play, which drives down wages, and then everyone wants to work and does work, and the whole culture and these type of people are telling them like, no, women shouldn't be at home and doing all this stuff. And so then people kind of get the golden handcuffs on where they have to pay for a nanny, to watch their kids so they can both work. And so it's just this perpetually bad cycle. And so ironically, the way to like become pro-family, capitalism doesn't really have anything to do with that necessarily. Capitalism is just how people choose to, exchange and voluntarily exchange goods and services. This is more of like this is like a a moral system, right? This is like, where's your locus of control and how you want to like live your life and all these different things. And yeah, that does play into how people, human labor moves from one place to another. But it's like values are what determine what people want to do. And these people don't, they'll say, hey, you're being anti-family and capitalism is anti-family, while also being a really big proponent of egalitarianism. And I don't think you can hold both those views at the same time. You kind of have to be complementarian. And it's like, hey, like men and women are different. They're equal, but they're different. And they're best suited for different roles and different jobs, like specialization, right? That's kind of the hallmark of capitalism. Men and women are specialized for different roles. And when they fulfill those roles, in most cases, the best type of society results in children are raised where they're supposed to be and educated the way they're supposed to be and in the best and most efficient way. And everything keeps moving on. And there's equilibrium in the market for the labor prices and all that stuff. But these people don't want any of that. And so they're just trying to, this post is just trying to leverage like, well, if you believe in capitalism, you can't believe in that and also be pro-family. It's just kind of like a gotcha that's disingenuous and not really well thought through because it's not thought through.
Well, and this particular individual, again, we're not outing him, not verified, but a wild situation. So this individual does have a family, 6 kids. He is a stay-at-home dad, self-described left progressive queer LDS, Latter-day Saints, which is very odd.
That doesn't exist.
Yeah, well, yeah, tell that to this guy and his wife. I don't know. But the thing about it that's so funny to me is that, capitalism, at the end of the day, free markets really, really mean the lack of government control and regulation. And the more you roll back the state, the more free people are to have families. Because you think about the most controlling economic systems, and those always come with the most repressive and controlling governments. And those are the ones that limit the amount of children you can have, either because of some sort of social welfare system where they realize that they can't sustain a number of people beyond whatever the scope is, so the population can't grow, or because of other authoritarian reasons. I mean, you think about the disastrous effects of the one China policy.
Yeah.
And it's like, really, at the end of the day, having more kids is actually the secret to building wealth in a nation state, in a general area, because new people are the biggest renewable resource in a sense, because there's unlimited innovation with new people. And yeah, they consume, obviously, because as a child you're somewhat of an economic parasite, but you eventually end up producing things of value with the best case scenario. And once you do that, you actually create new people who can multiply the amounts of value being created, the amount of work being put in, and the amount of ideas that you don't otherwise have. So ironically, it's like being pro-family kind of leads to a free market capitalist system where people can create value and exponentially grow the amount of resources, whereas any sort of controlled economy, while not directly limiting, always ends up leading to limiting a families because they can't support it to their own inevitable demise. Okay, we'll move on to our next cringe here. For this one, we've got someone who says, FBI can search my house any time of the day or night without a warrant because I am not guilty of any crime and would welcome an inspection and welcome them to take my passport too for inspection, as I'm not guilty. If you believe in search warrants, maybe you're guilty. And I couldn't verify if this person was legit or not when I looked. And maybe I need to do more, because it's such an unbelievable take. It's just such a crazy level of cope
in their names. So
I know that's kind of the like, oh man, this could be real. I don't know. And of course, let's assume for their sake that this is just a sort of a falsely written post. But the funny thing is, this is obviously not this is not an opinion that is unique. It is actually shared, and I've heard this kind of argumentation made by people who genuinely believe that if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. And And it also, this one also in particular kind of strikes me as that that post. I think we did this on Cringe Post a bit ago, where I think it was like Seth Rogen or something was saying like, well, I don't view your car being broken into as a, a violation of my personal self or whatever. I don't view my property as an extension of myself or something. Because I think Casey Neistat, the YouTuber, has had his car broken into and was, talking about how frustrating it was. And it's like this kind of combines both of those into the one take, where it's not only, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear, but also I search my house any time of day. And the thing is, with this line of thought, again, the biggest presumption that this makes, and I think in general right-wingers make, is this, and well, not even just right-wingers, I think just in general people make, is that it's this presumption of legitimacy to be searched, right? It's like this idea that if you get searched by the cops or by the FBI, it's their right to do that. They have to do that, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, all you have to do is apply this to like, hey, I'm going to walk over to this person's house and be like, hey, Miss whatever Ukraine flag lady, I want to search your house. And she's going to ask why, as any common sense person would do. I say, hey, like, no need to get offensive, or offended or anything like that. Like, if you have nothing to hide, like, you got nothing to fear. Like, I only have good intentions for coming in to search your house and go through all your drawers and see, your bank statements and all these different things. It's like, once you put it in that light of like one individual doing that to another individual, you're like, oh yeah, that's absurd, right? Like, it just as important as the fact that you have nothing to hide, it's also important to know that, like, hey, if you've got no reason to look, then why do you need to look, right? Like, it's important to know why the other party wants to search or do anything. And we apply that to any other individual anywhere at any point in society other than, the FBI or the government that we perceive to be legitimate. And it all rests on this premise that, like, oh, these people, they're good people and they never do anything wrong. I think I've talked about this before a long time ago on the show, but like my wife and I were watching, this is maybe a year, 2 years ago now, but we were watching an episode of Alias. And I remember, like, if you've never watched Alias, basically it's like this, it's the spy TV show. And there's like, it's based on the premise that there's actually competing organizations within the government, which happens to be almost true, in a lot of ways. So like within the CIA, there's different divisions and they'll actually like kill each other to like get ahead and serve different corrupt interests. And so the main character, breaks the story to some judiciary committee thing. And one of the guys is like, are you seriously expecting me to believe that we have hostile actors inside the FBI and CIA? And it's just like, you look at that and you're like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I do. And like, that's not that absurd of a thing. It's like, people talk about that we need government because people left unchecked will do bad things. But what is government other than a bunch of people left unchecked with unlimited power, right? And it's like, of all the people I want searching my house, it's definitely not some faceless bureaucrat that got a warrant from some other faceless bureaucrat, on the other side of the state that has never met me, that has reasons that I know not of and that I've never interacted with. That's the last person I want going through my house, even if I have nothing to hide, because I don't know what they're hiding from me, right? You can turn this right back around on them. And so this is the type of the kind of the attitude of like in the Soviet Union, where it's like, oh, like if I just keep my head down, they'll never come for me or come arrest me or anything like that. It's like, no, like, you don't realize once you've given this amount of power over to some faceless organization, you are at the mercy of their whims and what they want to do. And if you stand in the way of it, even if you've done nothing wrong, like, they're going to get you.
Well, and not to mention that people think that the FBI or whatever, because we live in a first world country, it's beyond reproach. It's beyond this level of blatant corruption, like you were pointing out. But I think about just all of the things that we have seen that have been declassified or leaked or whatever, and you can see the history of all of the examples of them. I mean, like, even to the point where you have, I'm not a Trump fan, but the FBI agents talking about how, oh, we're going to get Trump out of here. We're going to make sure it happens. And it's like, if the FBI was this cool, independent, biased, non-corrupt actor, their job would be to serve the president and say, we're just going to find if there's any wrongdoing. We're going to be thorough. Not we're going to get him out of here no matter what happens, right? And you think about in the example I always think of with the group International Justice Mission. They one of their services they provide is lawyers to people in impoverished countries whose governments or other are corrupt and they need legal defense, right? And so that's one of the things they do. And I remember the story about how in this one case, this guy went into a store and he was like there were two cops in the store or something, and he like shot his gun upward or something like that and that's you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to break the law. So he literally takes his gun and puts it in the store and then says, "Oh, it was this shopkeeper's gun. He shot up." And so they're like, "All right," they cart this guy off. No evidence, no proof, no nothing. And the story is long story short, they exonerated him and got him out. But the point is, it's like it didn't even take that in a very third world country, in a very corrupt system. It didn't take them actually searching the house for something for them to frame someone for wrongdoing. Think about how much more they can take your personal records if they are searching your house, even if you are perfectly innocent, and they can construct any kind of narrative, any kind of story they want to when they have access to your information. I mean, think about how everyone's condemning Trump right now because of the classified documents that he had. And it's like, all we know is that he had classified documents because they said so, and what more we know is quote unquote classified. And sure, Trump might have taken documents he wasn't supposed to or whatever. Sure, he may have, but we have no evidence of that. So why should I trust that they're not going to do the same thing about me? It's like, oh, they get some of my personal information, they leak half of the information out, and then they say the rest is classified, and they use that to build a case to come after me for whatever reason they want. Think about, again, oh, this would never happen in a first world country. They freaking froze the PayPal accounts of the truckers who were protesting the COVID lockdowns in Canada. These individual truckers were nobodies. These, no offense, I'm not saying they're worth less, but like they weren't notable individuals. They just took a stand. They were the working class. They weren't these high-profile Donald Trumps. They were just the everyman, and they got isolated. Their bank accounts got targeted. So, pardon me for being suspicious of a government that wants to invade my personal things, even if I've done nothing wrong, because they can always change the definition of what doing something wrong is.
That's a great point. Yeah. I just want to hammer again, everything you said was great, but I want to hammer at the legitimacy and the infallibility of these organizations, because people have this perceived thing from the public school system and all this stuff that, these guys are great, they always make the right choice, and I watch movies and TV shows like Alias, and there are heroes in the government are doing all this stuff. That's like, okay, does this sound like fiction to you? You've got Operation Northwoods, where they were literally conspiring to shoot down planes with American citizens in them to frame Cuba to go to war. That's a real thing. You got Operation Timber Sycamore, where they were selling weapons to Al Qaeda, the Obama administration. These FBI guys and all, they don't want any of us to have weapons because, like, oh man, you can't be trusted with it. That's like, oh, you look at these big organizations of the federal government, they've dropped nukes not just one time, 3 times on United States cities and states that would have gone off and killed millions of people. There was a hydrogen bomb. I'm reading it right here. There were 2 hydrogen bombs dropped accidentally over Goldsboro, North Carolina in 1961. The only reason they didn't go off is because there was a malfunction in the detonation device. Ironically, the weapons manufacturers did such a bad job that we avoided millions of people dying, but that still negates the fact that those things were dropped, like in an actual world scenario where they could go off. And so, these agencies and these people, they're fallible like you or I. If you wouldn't trust your neighbor to do something like, search your house, there's no way in heck you should trust the government to go through your house without having at least a valid and good explanation for why.
Absolutely right. Okay, we're going to move on, and we kind of got a pairing of the last 2 cringes here, so I'm going to read them together because they're both topically similar on the opposite sides of the issue here. So we're going to start with an infamous tweet that I believe is now deleted. It got so much flashback. And this comes from Representative Jim Banks, who tweets, Student loan forgiveness undermines one of our military's greatest recruitment tools at a time of dangerously low enlistments. Wow, what the heck? I think I'm pro student loan forgiveness. What the like, oh my gosh. And then our second tweet comes from Tatiana Prowell, MD, also verified, who tweets, "Our household won't get any educational loans paid off, but we'll benefit because a more equitable and just nation is a better place to live. Cheers to everyone who qualified for loan forgiveness." Okay, nope, I'm against loan forgiveness again. Okay, we balance ourselves out here, but oh man, these are both really good. I'm gonna start just with the Jim Banks one because it was the first one we read here, and what I love about this is he's sort of admitting how student loan forgiveness undermines the greatest recruitment tool, and the greatest recruitment tool thereby being sort of this monetary trap of, you know, it's hey, are you, you know, hopelessly indebted to these government, you know, lenders? Well, you can come kill people for us and be, you know, enslave yourself to our regiment, and then you won't, you know, then you can free yourself of this crushing debt. Like, oh, that's such a good look for these lender programs. Like, wow, what a great recruitment tool for the military. And so this one's been getting dunked on by both conservatives and liberals because of that fact. Right. And you know, it
sounds like funny because 87,000 Marines instead of 87,000 IRS agents.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. He would rather these student loans be going to military academies than to public universities. Yeah. And so yeah, so that, I mean, that's obviously just very, very funny. And you know, with the low recruitment, the other takes I've seen about the low recruitment is like people are like, is it time to bring back the draft? And I'm like, oh my gosh, these are horrible things. But again, the student loan forgiveness, the actual, you know, idea of loans being relieved from people is not, it's like, of all the things government does, that's not the worst one. It's kind of like complaining about the idea of free healthcare because it's like, oh, then poor people will be able to get coverage. It's like, well, no, I mean, that's technically, you know, a thing that could happen in this scenario, but it makes the problem worse. And that's obviously, we're not complaining about the fact that poor people could get coverage. We're complaining because it doesn't help them get coverage and it doesn't make things better and stuff. And so this just makes me laugh because they're like, you know, student loan forgiveness has a lot of things wrong with it. But like the idea that you're rescuing kids from having to pick things like going into the military, that's not the problem. If you're able to you know, if the government were able to somehow effectively actually relieve the student loan debt from people in bad loans, then I would actually consider it. Like, maybe this is worth it. The problem is, of course, the government's the one giving the loans. The government's the one who's providing the very evil that it's saying, oh, we can help with. And this doesn't actually cure it or whatever. But it's just so funny that the way that this is phrased, it's like you're attacking the very wrong thing. Like, of all the things that this could possibly do, I think that preventing someone from going into a lifetime of military service, or not even a lifetime, but like years of military service, yeah, to enslavement for their, you know, in order to avoid this like trap of debt, that is not one of the negatives.
Yeah, he was playing Republican Mad Libs there. You know, such and such social issue, insert how it affects the military. So I'll take the second lady, Tatiana Prowell, MD, with a mask on in her profile picture. You know, what's so funny, and this is kind of the general sentiment that I think I hear people saying, like, well, what's the big deal about, you know, this loan forgiveness if it benefits everyone and everyone is better made off? But it's like, I don't, like you're saying, there's worse things that the government does, namely like blowing up people and robbing people and all this stuff that they do.
Which we'll lose out if we forgive these loans.
Exactly.
Be careful.
Yeah. We lost the revenue. But it's like, no, this doesn't, the reason this is so bad is because it doesn't fix the problem, right? Like I've talked about earlier in the show, I was part of a startup for 3 years, talked to different venture capitalists, tried to secure some different financing that way. You know, these venture capitalists will loan you money, and if you don't return, you know, their investment plus a little bit of percentage, they view you as a bad investment. And so no one's asking that question about college education. It's like, well, you know, we have however many millions of people got a college education, and supposedly we're supposed to help them out. They took out this debt that isn't paying itself back. It's like, well, that by definition is a bad investment. Why is it a bad investment? Why is it so expensive? And why is it not paying a return? And then on top of that, you're going to forgive all these loans, and then you're going to continue loaning this money out again. And it's like, okay, well, maybe a part of the reason why this got so bad in the first place, like if you look at a chart of college cost, versus any other commodity out there, it's like, wow, this thing is like, it's a hockey puck or a hockey stick like line going over all these different things. And like, it does not, it's not correlated to any of the other, commodities that have been inflated. It's something crazy, thousands of a percentage point higher. And so it's like, okay, well, what's causing that? It's like, well, it's probably the loans. If colleges and universities say like, oh, we have an artificial floor, right? Like, I know that everyone can take out, 30, 40, 50, $120,000 in loans. Like, why would I ever charge less than that to come to the university if I know I can get that? And so you just kind of perpetuate this cycle. And then on top of that, these things are becoming worth less and less and less because the education isn't very good and the people aren't actually learning skills and all this stuff. And it's a piece of paper that is no longer scarce, right? It doesn't mean anything to get it. So it's like, the reason, Tatiana, that we don't like this is not because I don't want people to be happy or to thrive. It's because precisely the opposite. I want them to be happy. I want them to thrive. I want there to be good things happening. And this actually perpetuates the cycle that you're trying to solve. And there's so many things when government does stuff. They just send in a nice mixed, confusing signal that no one can actually operate off of. And it's going to be a huge issue. It's not going to make it more equitable. It's not going to make it a better place to live. It'll make it more miserable.
Yeah. Right. And as you pointed out, like when you're taking out that loan, you have to view it as like that investment, right? So if you're not able to pay it off and get more value out of it than it's costing you, it's a bad investment. But it's also a bad investment on the lender's behalf to see like, is this student going to be able to pay back this loan? And again, it's not totally independent because it is the government itself that's giving out these loans. But if you think about it just from the individual actor of the loaner's perspective, they're also obviously evaluating the student of like, what's the likelihood of them being able to pay me back? The student should be evaluating what's the likelihood that this degree that I'm pursuing will be able to pay me back for this, loan that I'm essentially taking out. And so there's two parts of in terms of evaluations of, is this a bad loan? Both from the student saying, is this a bad loan in the sense that, will this money get me the ability to make money? And then the loaner, the lender itself saying, is this actor that I am loaning the money going to be able to get it back to me? And this sort of payment shows that it's like, oh, our range for, people who we don't think will have enough just got $10,000 wider. We now have a little bit more stretch room here to say, oh, this person, there's not really a likelihood that they're going to be able to pay us back. But with $10,000 back in there, maybe it is a little bit worth it for the time being. They'll be able to, quote unquote, get relieved a little bit and make some more payments to us, and we'll milk some money out of them there. And conversely, students think, oh, well, I might not be able to swing this, but with this kind of, if we get another bailout like we got there, then I'll be fine. So, there's so much political pressure for it. So there's going to be another one. Exactly. And so, it's like, it shows you, it's a very tangible way to show that this kind of debt will be forgiven, even if you don't have a realistic way to pay it. It's like, oh, things will just work out. People will just pay for it. It will be on the line. And, for people who really want the government to teach morals and to make us better people, this isn't teaching people to tackle challenges on their own and be self-sufficient. It's definitely teaching you that you'll just get saved and bailed out. And you know what? Someone else's hard work will pay out for you. And the last thing I'll say just is that, like, I don't even fault. I mean, I do to some degree, but it's not the same level of fault in general that I put on the students that are taking out these loans, because so many cases these students are being culturally shown, oh, you have to go to college. It's the expectation. Parents are the ones saying, oh, you got to go to college. And it's okay to take out a loan because we did it. And so the parents are signing them up for this, and they're kind of being drifted along. And there's so many things in life when you're learning and growing where you don't fully grasp what's going on, and you just have to sort of take the people in authority's word for it, namely should be your parents. And the problem is, they're right on the cusp of the age of being able to take a stand and say, no, this is a bad investment, but so many aren't because of this massive cultural pressure. So again, it is on them a bit, but it's also just a matter of these awful universities that are creating this atmosphere, this awful government providing this awful avenue for bad loan and investment. And frankly, it's a lot of, parents who aren't assessing the situation accurately to say, is my kid, should they go to college? Is what they want to do worth it to get a degree, is, these kinds of things. And then they're just sort of talking their kid into it on their behalf.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say on this, and it's such a great example of how prices are vitally important to, any economy functioning, because, in a free market society that we desire, if you have the money to pay for it, that means you're probably qualified and the best suited to go actually go do that. Right. Because it's like, you're going to risk the money and you're probably going to lose it or win it, make more money on it, depending on what it is. And because you've earned it, you're probably qualified to make that decision. And no one in their right mind would go loan $100,000 or even $30,000 to a college student, or not even college student, an 18-year-old who just graduated high school, has worked maybe a summer job, and has no savings built up or down payment on it or plan for how they're going to return all this investment back. No one in their right mind would loan money to them. Yet we have made it so easy. You don't have to do anything to qualify for it other than say that, oh, I'm poor. Student loans are one of the only type of loans where you qualify for it if you're poor. And it's the exact opposite of how all of these different types of financing should be done. If you try and go to a mortgage broker and try to get a loan for $30,000, even just a personal lender, and say, I have no money, I have no prospects, I have no savings, give me $30,000. I mean, they'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't even need to open an application for you. It's going to be a no from us. And so, like you're saying, I don't blame these kids. All the adults in the room are telling them, go take this money out, saddle yourself with a house worth of debt, to start your life out before you even know what you're going to do or how much money you're going to make. And, we'll go into the different career paths at a different time. I have a post for that, basically criticizing the trades and stuff. It's around here in Seattle, if you work in the HVAC trade, you'll probably make $180K and you won't have any college debt for it. And there's a lot of stigma against that, but we can maybe go into that at a different time.
That's about right. Well, thanks for being with us here tonight, folks. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Make sure to leave a like and a comment and all that good stuff, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care.